Although pay isn't one of them, working for an airline has its benefits. You get to travel to far-off romantic places like San Francisco, Rome, London, Kyoto, Amsterdam, Buenos Aires, Budapest, Khabarovsk, Sydney. Hang on, back up. Khabarovsk? Where the hell is that? I suddenly had to find out when Aeroflot started a weekly flight and this critter started showing up in Seattle. I walked over to their office to ask what they would charge a fellow airline employee for a ticket. Free, they told me. That fell right into my price range. Off to the library for my very first experience on the internet to find out. Khabarovsk is in eastern Siberia. I discovered that there was a second, mostly unknown Trans-Siberian railroad called the Baikal-Amur Mainline. Russians call it the BOM. Only about 50 foreign travelers rode it per year at the time. I ordered a BOM guidebook and then figured out how to get a visa. One sentence in the embassy info online got my attention. If you fail to get your visa stamped on entry, you may be prevented from living. That's a typo, right? And then this happened. 3 weeks before my trip, the Aeroflot pilot tried to land on 1st Avenue in Buryan. Twice. Despite this sinister stuff, I got on the jet anyway. As we got close, one of the few English announcements proclaimed that we were diverting to Vladivostok due to a blizzard. We landed several hours later with no further updates. I was halfway through the terminal before I realized we had actually landed in Khabarovsk. I took a bus to the train station to get a train schedule and saw that there was an overnight train to Komsomolsk-on-Amur that was about to leave. I decided not to stick around. Took care of a place to sleep for the night too. The next morning I got my first look around Siberia in daylight. The overnight snow was quickly being plowed and turning to slush. The city of Komsomolsk-on-Amur was decreed into being in 1932 as a site for a shipyard and aircraft factory. With a population of 250,000, it's the 4th largest city in Siberia. I will begin my journey on the BOM here. There are no trains that run through the entire length of the BOM, some sections not even with daily service, so some stops along the way are necessary and welcome. These RVZ-6 trams, said to be based on the PCC, are built in Latvia and common all over Russia and Eastern Europe. I board a train that afternoon to its terminus, Tienda. The 900-mile trip will take 38 hours. This isn't high-speed railroad. The track is laid over permafrost and the top speed is 40 miles per hour. The book says there is an excellent Baikal-Amur Mainline museum in Tienda. The next day, a stop in Fevralsk gives an opportunity to view the 2 TE-10s on our train. The TE-10 has opposed piston 2-stroke prime movers similar to a Fairbanks Morse. Fevralsk, which translates to February, is a logging town and a typical Siberian settlement where a number of high-rise block buildings suddenly rise out of the desolate forest. They look like apartment complexes, but in addition to apartments contain stores, offices, and more.
Солнце в небе светит мудро, молодеет древний край. От Байкала до Амура мы проложим магистраль. Встретим зябкие рассветы, встретим долгую пургу. Биографию планеты пишем мы свою строку. Слышишь, время гудит, на просторах крутых, и большая тайга покоряется нам. Слышишь, время гудит, на просторах крутых, это колокол наших сердец.
It was early when the train arrived in Tienda, the capital of the BOM. I checked into a hotel and went to find the museum. The museum turned out to be housed in the town library and was closed for lunch when I found it, so I waited. It was one of those times where what you envisioned in your head turned out to be nothing like you thought. The museum was just one room, but was interesting nevertheless. The girls took control of my phrasebook and dictionary and were very helpful. My home state followed me here. Turns out Wenatchee is Tienda's sister city, and apparently it's a big deal. I walked around Tienda and ended up trackside. There wasn't much else to do. I checked the schedule and there was no westbound train the following day, but there was one that evening. I changed my mind about staying and got my stuff from the hotel. At least I got a shower out of it. These TEM-2s are cloned from Alco RSD-1s that were sent to Russia after World War II. There are thousands throughout Russia and Europe. They have V6 turbocharged prime movers. The next train will take me to Severodvinsk on the north shore of Lake Baikal. The 800-mile trip will take 29 hours. I shared a compartment with a Russian couple. The next morning we made friends and got to know each other, sort of, by passing the dictionary around. He was in construction, or a miner or something, I gathered from his digging gestures. He disappeared at one point and came back, proudly holding up a vodka bottle. It was very early in the day, but why not? It's not like I had to drive. We finished the bottle. I remember looking out the window and thinking about how cool it was being on a train in the middle of the Siberian wilderness. But I don't remember much after that. When I came to that afternoon, the couple was gone and there was a mom with a young boy who was bouncing around the compartment.
Слышишь, время гудит, на просторах других. Это колокол наших сердец молодых.
The info desk at the Severodvinsk depot sent me on a 30-minute stroll in the dark to some A-frame cottages outside the small town. Knocking on the office door shortly before midnight, my host was gracious and excited to have a foreign guest. She set me up in a room and communicated that her son spoke English and would be by the next day to talk. She also indicated they had a boat if I wanted to go out on the lake. Early the next morning, I found a vantage point and waited a while for a train. Walked through the yard and checked out the deadline, then went back to the cottages. Her son told me that unfortunately the boat was already scheduled for a crew to take it out fishing. But if I wanted, I could go with them. But they were going to be out all night. I've never been one to pass up an adventure. I was picked up and driven to the dock in Nizhny-Garsk, about 20 miles east. It was one of those times when what you had envisioned in your head turned out to be nothing like you thought. The boat turned out to be more of a ship, and our fishing expedition wasn't what I expected. When we got ready to go, they couldn't get the engine started, so we ended up waiting several hours while it was repaired. The guy set up a spread in the galley, and I cycled between keeping warm in there and hanging on the dock watching trains. This VL-85 AC electric locomotive at 12,500 horsepower is one of the most powerful in the world. When the motor finally started, it was getting dark. We motored out about a quarter mile. Then, they blew up a small rubber raft, and one of the guys paddled around setting nets. The entire operation took just a few minutes. Then they shut down the boat, and we all went back to the galley. Out came the vodka. My inside still felt like I had swallowed nails from my vodka experience the day before, and I just wasn't up to drinking much. They just made fun of me and kept pouring more. I did the best I could. Hours went by, and finally one of the guys started worriedly looking around at all the empty vodka bottles. I was thankfully thinking they had finally run out of vodka, and I felt a wave of relief. Moments later, one of the guys came in hugging at least a dozen more bottles to his chest. I had had enough. I crawled into the corner and closed my eyes. At first light, the crew mobilized. They fired up the boat and started dragging the nets aboard, dumping hundreds of omul, a whitefish endemic to Lake Baikal, on the deck. Omul is considered a delicacy and was listed in Russia as an endangered species in 2004. A few minutes later, we were back at the dock, and I am fortunate to get a train passing in sunlight while the fish are bagged and offloaded. Then back to Severodvinsk for a nap. I was awoke a few hours later by the proprietor's daughter at the door with a plate of omul for lunch. She suggested I join the family that afternoon for a picnic along the shore of Lake Baikal. I couldn't say no. Lake Baikal is both the deepest and largest by volume lake in the world. It contains almost 25% of the world's fresh water. The next day, after making an appearance at an English class at the request of my hosts, I left for Irkutsk. This trip will require a connection in Bratska the following day.
Рельсы упрямо режут тайгу, дерзко и прямо, в зной и в пургу. Веселей, ребята, выпало нам строить путь железный, а короче бам. Скалы и чащи, все он пройдет, наш работящий, смелый народ. Веселей, ребята, выпало нам строить путь железный, а короче бам. Над звездным кружит наш вертолет.
I have a little time at Vivkarevka where I change and board the nicest of the trains I rode in Russia. The Angara, or Fermeni, or name brand train with upgraded equipment and services will cover the 600-mile trip in 17 hours. At Teshet, the Baikal-Amur Mainline meets the Trans-Siberian. The Angara, westbound on the bomb, now turns east on the Trans-Siberian to Irkutsk. In Irkutsk, I phoned Lydia, a graduate of the Severobaykalsk English School. She was expecting my call, and she gave me a tour around Irkutsk. Established as a trading settlement in the 1600s, Irkutsk developed as a center of science and culture in Siberia. It is the halfway point on the Trans-Siberian between Moscow and Vladivostok. I asked Lydia what was going on here. She didn't have the words to explain and said, "Wait and you will see." School children guard the World War II Eternal Flame Memorial. I got on a train that afternoon intending to go 90 miles south where the Trans-Siberian followed the coast. Aboard the train I met a film crew from Russian Greenpeace. I was surprised that there was a Russian Greenpeace. They were heading to a paper mill in Baikalsk that was dumping pollution into Lake Baikal. For some reason they wanted me to go with them. I initially resisted, but it did sound like an adventure. The next morning the paper mill management was unhappy to have Greenpeace visiting. They were really unhappy that they brought a foreigner with them. They eventually allowed the film crew in, but not the foreigner. I got a ride to the train station. The paper mill would eventually close in 2013. I spent the morning viewing Siberian village architecture, walking along Lake Baikal, and shooting a few trains before boarding a train for the 4-hour, 200-mile ride to Ulan-Ude.
Как на озере таежном заревела лень, как на просеке лесной.
While looking for a place to stay, I flagged down a couple on the street and pointed to the hotel name in the book. The guy gave me extensive directions that I couldn't understand. At one point he gestured over his head and I thought he said Lenin. I went off in the direction he pointed and I knew I was on the right track when I saw this statue of Lenin's head, the largest in Russia. Ulan-Ude is the junction between the Trans-Siberian and the Trans-Mongolian Railway, which heads south through Mongolia and on to China. A walk around town and then down to catch a morning train where the engine house is nicely accessible next to the depot. This next trip will be a long 1,600-mile 2-day journey to Birobidzhan. At the stops along the way, vendors are always on hand. I got to witness the ritual of loved ones seeing off travelers. It was always the same. One would crack open a 2-liter bottle of beer and they would all have a drink. It's cold outside, but inside the trains are always hot. Really hot. Days of everyone traveling in the heat would get the train smelling pretty right. The name signs at the Birobidzhan depot are in both Russian and Hebrew, as this is the administrative center of the Jewish Autonomous Oblast or province. It was established in the late 20s and the Jewish population peaked after World War II, but it has been in decline ever since. Today, 0.2% of the population is Jewish. The Trans-Siberian is a busy railroad, and I enjoyed spending some time watching trains, even if I wasn't getting any respect. It's just a short 120-mile ride to Khabarovsk the next day. 2 weeks, 5,100 miles, and I have gone full circle. I get to spend a day exploring the city I left so quickly at the beginning of the trip and head home. And we're at the end. I'm sitting on the plane and it's 2 hours past departure time and we are still at the gate. I asked the Aeroflot flight attendant if there was a problem. She says, "No problem," and walks away.
Как всегда мы до ночи стояли с тобой, как всегда было этого мало, как всегда позвала тебя мама домой, я метнулся к вокзалу, а опять от меня сбежала последняя электричка, и я по шпалам, опять по шпалам иду домой по привычке. А вокруг тишина, а вокруг ни души, только рельсы усталые стонут, только месяц за мною вдогонку бежит мой товарищ бессонный, а опять от меня сбежала последняя электричка, и я по шпалам, опять по шпалам иду домой по привычке.